I want to pivot, to use a word, to China.
That's a military word.
It's a word Hillary Clinton also had about turning away from Middle East foreign policy and pivoting to China. And I want to talk about your career there, because I think it's a really interesting place for us to reflect on World Press Freedom Day. But most importantly, I love the journey that it's where you began your career, and it's where you are going back to now as a reporter in the field. So maybe we'll start off with the quick scene of how you become a journalist in China. Take us back there.
China was a completely different country back in 1988 when I did move over to Beijing. My wife and I lived there from 88 to 89. And I was a lawyer at the time, and I was practicing.
Thank God we got you out of that.
There's some others around here too. I went to work doing mergers and acquisitions at a large firm in New York in 1987, and then the market just collapsed in October of 1987, and so there was no merging, no acquiring. So it was incredibly boring. And so since I had studied Chinese when I was at Michigan Law School, I told them after about 6 months there, I said, listen, I'm bored. I'm going to take a year off next year if I can. I'm going to go with some of my Chinese friends from Michigan. Can get me a job teaching young Chinese law students at the largest Chinese law school. And they said, all right. So I kind of went and represented them to a small degree. And so I asked my wife to marry me. And so 2 days after we got married, we moved over to Beijing in 1988.
So there was one merger.
There wasn't a sexual merge I've ever been good to. That was wonderful. And that one, actually, that deal is still there.
Still there? And then it became an acquisition at some point.
Yeah, or no bankruptcy yet. Except maybe financially. But anyway. So anyway, my wife and I, we moved over to Beijing in 1988, and I was still in the world of law and the young Chinese students, and I was learning China. I remember I had a big speech in a room, about 400 young students, and I said at the end of this talk, I just talked about American law, international law, business, and I said at the end, if you have any questions, just pass up little cards of your questions. And there was not a single question about law or business or anything. It was all, who's your favorite celebrity? What kind of car do you have? If your wife and your mother were drowning in the river, which one would you save? And I said, well, I'd save my mom because I can get another wife. And I got a standing ovation. So then I knew, I literally lived in the school, in this dorm that had been, we were the first Westerners, the second year of Westerners even teaching at the school. And the dorm was remarkable. I mean, it was a small, tiny room filled with, straw beds we were sleeping on. The toilets were just holes, and the shower was in the middle of the campus. And my wife had moved over there with me. She was actually a vice president of a PR firm in New York at the time. Nothing to do, so bored. Went down. She went down and got a job at Hill & Knowlton, and they were just shocked. She walked in, she said, "Do you have any work for me? You don't have to move me here. I got a free place to stay. Can I come to work, please?" And that's what she did.
So you guys took a chance as a young couple and went out in the world. But how does journalism?
It wasn't a risk, though. That was just like an adventure. And then at the end of that year, all my students started this uprising against the government because of what was happening. And so all my classes stopped. And I had nothing else to do, so I knew one Western journalist that I'd never really known many before, and he was a sound man for CBS. And I said, listen, is there anything to do with CBS? Why you guys are doing this? And Dan Rather was coming over and all these people. I said, yeah, you can just get a job as a fixer, get us all the people around the city, because I knew all the people in the town, and I could speak some of the language. So I got them around the streets, and then Tiananmen Square massacre happened. And I'll never forget what we witnessed it was a life-changing moment. But after that, I left China, kind of given up on China, all of that, and we moved back to San Francisco, same law firm.
But wait, I gotta stop you there for a second. You take the risk to go out in the world, to go to a place where you had studied the language, you get set up, and suddenly, probably the most dramatic story in at least a decade was unfolding right in front of you. You then experienced journalism for the first time, and does the bug hit you right away?
Yeah, absolutely it did. Absolutely it did. But I also didn't have like this brand new wife, you know, and was I going to suddenly, you know, marry her and then just change everything in an instant? Well, 2 more years went back and practiced law, but by the end of after about a year and a half there, I was so bored by it, and all I could think about was the bug.
Right.
You know, I wanted to do the same thing, and I almost had this, you know, ignorant assumption that maybe this is what all the stories are like. When you go to Tiananmen Square, amazing, there you are, you know, in the square in the middle of Cairo, you know, like an uprising, you know, every other week. So I went back and I said, you know, I think I needed change, Lee. And we were young and we didn't have a kid yet,
Right.
and then decided to get into journalism. And so I did, and I just started bumping around and went to a tiny little local station up in Redding, California. I think it was 125th Market, and shot everything, edited everything, fed everything on the live truck, do my own, don't shoot myself for stand-ups and things like that, and even live. I'll never forget my very first one. There was a train. I don't know if you guys have heard this story before, but there was a train that went off the rail up there and spilled some kind of chemicals. So that happened during the day. So I went, shot the whole thing, edited the thing, fed it back, had to drive my own live truck out to the spot. And I stand there in front of this rail and I'm like sweating out of fear. Like I've never been live like this before. I'm just, what am I supposed to say? I knew what to say, but I didn't know what he's going to toss to me, all this thing. We didn't even have earplugs. I mean, we didn't have
the earpiece.
You know, we had a walkie-talkie that we put on a tripod right here and just then turn it way down so you get feedback. And I was just literally standing with a microphone like this, and I said, well, you can see, there's right here beside me that. And I went back, and there's my wife, like breastfeeding our baby. We had baby right before we started, to tell you the truth. And there she is, just freaking out, like, oh my God, what have we done? We saw we were living like in a trailer practically, and the woman who owned this place was walking down the street, and I said, hey, Mary, did you see me on television tonight? She said, yes, I did. And I said, what'd you think? She goes, that was the worst damn thing I've ever seen. So that was the beginning of this.